Hey guys, quick update on the auto drop module kit that I make for the 63 Continentals. This kit can be adapted to work with the 61 and 2s depending on your window motors. It can also be adapted to work with the 66 and 67s. A few items I wanted to go over real quick because I see some people struggling and I get a lot of the same questions. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of those things. Different ways to install it. The brain goes in the trunk, constant power and ground. There's these 4 wires that go into each door. So it's labeled right door, left door. These wires are just 24 gauge. You have to cut. There's these DuPont connectors. You cut them off, extend it through the door, solder it, shrink wrap it, tape it, whatever. But make sure you have a good connection. This module goes inside of the door. I include these little Ziploc static bags so that you can put this module inside of the bag, inside of the door, tie it up nice and neat. These go to the motor. This is your low limit switch. I'll come back to this in a second, but I just wanted to touch base on different ways of installing it because there's different ways of doing it because there's so many different variations of cars and convertible and sedan and original motors and convertible motors and sedan motors and there's just a lot of ways to do it. So this kit is designed to be universal, so you can use it in any model. You just have to have a little bit of know-how on how to configure it. So the way that it works, again, you extend these wires, you put this in the door, but there has been a lot of people who choose to put these in both relays in a box with this box in the trunk, and then just extend these wires, the motor wires, and the low limit switch through the door, just that way you don't have the relay in the trunk. That's fine. If you choose to do that, still cut these off and solder them. Don't leave these DuPont connectors here like this. I only use these so that I encourage you that when you get the kit, bench test it, play with it so that you understand it because it helps you get your brain around what it's trying to do. Nothing more confusing than when you get into the car and you don't understand why it's doing or why it's not doing what you're expecting it to do. So these are so that you can like disconnect it, extend it, play with it or whatever, put it back together. And then when you're ready to make it permanent, then you cut those off, solder it, and then be done with it. So if you're going to run the original style motors, if you're going to run original Lincoln motors, they pull a lot of amps. I have in my instructions, I wanted to just mention it again, you need to load test those motors. So when you're lifting the motors, you need to put your amp meter on it. If you're pulling more than 8 or 9 amps, these relays are limited at 10 amps. If you try and pull 10 amps through them, I have seen these relays fail. And what'll happen is there's the copper embedded in the PCB or PCB. It'll just basically pop like a fuse, and then these are dead. Fortunately, you can get these modules pretty cheap on Amazon. They are easily replaceable, but it's easier to just avoid it. So load test your motors. If they're drawing less than 8 amps, you can just use these to just power your motors directly. If you're pulling more than 8 amps, then you need to use these relays to trigger heavier 30 amp typical 87A style motors. If you're running convertible motors, then there is a 4th pin that you have to ground, and then you can run them directly off of this as long as it's less than 8 amps. And if you're running the 61 and 2 motors, again, you can run it off of these, but you'll have to use a pair of diodes with an extra relay. The diagrams and the instructions, because there's a 4th wire on 61 and 2 sedan motors that has to be energized in order for them to work. Say all that to say, more often than not, it is easier and safer to just go to the Dorman motors. They're 30 bucks a piece and they will make your life easier. They draw less than 5 amps, and because you have to use a pair of switching relays, it takes away the guesswork. So you would convert to the Dorman motors. Nathan Wilson has an awesome video on how those work, how that conversion works. Wire up the relays. I have a diagram that I will provide with the instructions on how to hook up the relays. And then all you're doing then is you have trigger wires that are on the relays. Your pin 85 and 86 are your triggers on the relays. So then these are just basically triggering the up relay and the down relay trigger wire inside the door and 12 volts. And then in that case, because you're probably only pulling like 40 milliamps off of these relays, it makes it even easier to just put this into the trunk because you're not trying to pull 8 or 10 amps through 15 feet of wire by having it go from your from this relay in the trunk all the way through that complicated door loom into the door to drive original style motors. So if you're in there, if you're not opposed to cutting up your regulators, just go with the Dormans. It makes life easier for everybody. Now, if you do go with the Dormans, there is a special relay you have to use. You have to use a relay that has an integrated flyback diode. If you don't, those switching relays introduce electrical noise to the system. It'll wig the Arduino out a little bit. It won't hurt it, but you'll find that you'll close the door and the window will go like up and down, up and down. So what that is that power backfeed from those switching relays, just sort of tripping it up. So there are special relays. Again, I have the part number for the Bosch particular relays. You can get them at O'Reilly's. They're like $8 or $9. It makes your life easier. So, and then if you use those, eliminates the problem. You can also buy a bag of like 100 diodes for a couple of bucks and solder your own diodes in, but it is just easier and simpler to buy the right relays that has the diode already baked in. So, getting back to how this thing works. There are 4 wires that go into your door, and then there is a matching pin wire. You see I got right door, so there's the 4 wires out of the right door, and then there's a right pin wire. In the sedans, inside of the latch, there's a pin. When the door opens, the pin pops out, and basically it is sending a signal to ground. What that signal is the light, the idiot light on your dash that says rear door ajar. By installing this kit, you're losing that light. You can't just tap into that wire. You have to cut that wire, abandon that wire, and then this is the only thing that is going onto that spring-loaded pin that's inside of the door. The problem is if you try and leave it hooked up, when one goes to ground, it backfeeds the signal and it'll actually activate both windows, even though only one door has been opened or closed or whatever. So when the door is closed, the pin is pushed in, which means it is floating, which is what you see it doing right now. So when you open the door, the pin goes to ground, right? So to simulate ground, or not simulate ground, but actually do ground, right? Ground. Oh, I pushed it twice. Hang on. There. You open the door. This relay runs the motor down, runs your window down. You open the door. You want the window to go down. And I have this labeled as down, right? When you close the door, that pin gets pushed in. You're breaking ground. So when I break ground, it runs the window up. So you'll see that when it went down for about 3/4 of a second, but when it went up for about 2 seconds. So that's just because the windows are heavier. They tend to go a little bit slower when they're going up. And that seems to be about the right amount of time I have found. These are time-based, not position-based. If you find that it's not going all the way up far enough, you can adjust how long it runs it up for. Likewise, if you find that the down is not getting down far enough, that it's clearing the front door, you can adjust the length of time that they run down. Or if you find that it's rolling halfway down and you don't need it to go halfway down, you only need to drop a couple of inches, you can reduce the time that it drops. So all you do is you take the cover off of this. There's 2 potentiometers in here. The top one is the length of time that the window rolls up when you close it. There's a scale of 0 to 4 seconds. You can see it's in the middle, so it's about 2 seconds. The bottom one is the length of time that it goes down. It's set at about 1 second. So again, scale of 0 to 4, you can see it's at about 1/4. The bottom one, you'll have to note that it's 180 degrees. It's upside down from the top one. So it's at about, it's 1/4 of the way in its rotation. So 1/4 of 4 seconds is 1 second. So when you open the door, it rolls down for 1 second. When you close the door, it rolls up for 2 seconds. So those are there. You can tweak it. Tiny, tiny amounts. Gentle force, gentle pressure. You don't need to go cranking on it. They're delicate. They're sturdy, but if you go cranking on it, they're easy to bust off. If you go too far, if you feel them stopping, stop. Go the other way. So don't keep forcing it. It doesn't go all the way around. It's kind of like a 270 degree potentiometer. So I think that's about it. Just again, reiterating that the door pin wire has to be isolated to only this. Oh, and if you're doing a convertible, the convertible door pin, the factory pin doesn't just simply go to ground. It actually has 2 sets of wires that goes through, so 4 wires. So 2 of the factory wires are for the factory auto drop. If you're building a convertible, you have to completely eliminate all of the factory auto drop stuff. It all has to come out, and you have to bypass everything. Usually by the time, if you're pulling all the factory auto drop out, you're converting to the dormer motors anyways. It's probably easier to just do a brand new harness from basically the B-pillars back, which is really just 4 wires on each side. So off of your main, the master drive panel, or panel in the driver door, there's really only 4 wires that go back to the rear doors. There's up from the driver's panel, down, there's a 12 volt, there's a ground wire. Like, that's it. So everything else that comes after that is just extra crap to make the convertible factory auto drop work. So that whole chunk of harness, everything that's inside of the door, all the stuff that's behind the seat to do with the factory auto drop, all of that can come out. You can just make a new simple harness that just comes off of the master panel into your door, new switches, new motors with the reversing relays, and then this just piggybacks onto the back of the switches into the input side of those flyback diode relays. So the four wire door pin of the convertibles, you'll have to take two of the wires, you have to test them. You have to, again, floating when it's pushed in, connected when it's when the door is open. Connect one wire to ground, the other wire just goes to this. That is it. So the other side of the convertible 4-pin, you can leave that as your idiot light on the dash because you don't have to eliminate it. If you're gonna mount this in the trunk, you can just unscrew this. It's just a number 1. Pull these out and just extend it. These are just little relays, and there's a little diagram on the board that shows you how the relays work. I hope that clears some things up. It's been a few years since the last time I did an update video on these, so they are different slightly than the previous models. They're a little bit, they switch a little bit faster. They're a little bit more efficient on energy. It's a little bit more durable. There's people that have been running this kit for years and it's been rock solid. But as always, you guys know how to find me. Sorry for droning on for, 10 minutes, but there's a lot of important information that I see people struggling with again and again. I just wanted to do an updated video while I had some of these ideas that I've been recently talking to people about, just to make sure you guys aren't stumbling over something that's relatively easy. So you know how to find me. If you have any questions, shoot them at me. Talk to you later.